I never thought the day would come like that. In a cold hospital room, with the steady beep of the heart monitor and the harsh white light illuminating everything, even the betrayal. My wife, Melissa, had just given birth. She sat there, looking radiant, her hair neatly tied back as if she were preparing for a photo shoot, not having just gone through childbirth. In her arms was a baby that I knew instantly wasn't mine. Then she looked up at me, her voice so gentle it sent a chill down my spine. "Can you take me to see Derek? I want to show him the baby he created." Each word felt like it hit the floor and shattered. I didn't scream. I didn't yell. I just quietly walked over and tore the birth certificate into pieces. Not out of anger, but because I knew. That's when everything truly began. And I had finally woken up from the dream I tried so hard to believe was real. I stood there, my hands still clammy, palms ice cold even though the hospital room was warm and brightly lit. That white light seemed to expose every crack inside me, every emotion I was trying to hold tight in my chest. Melissa lay in the bed, the woman I had loved for the past 6 years, holding a newborn baby. Not my child. I knew at the moment I saw her eyes, the kind of eyes completely devoid of guilt, as if this whole thing was normal, as if I were just a delivery guy waiting for instructions. She turned her head when she heard the door open. That smile. God, that smile. Soft, calm, and something else, triumphant. Like she'd just completed a long-term plan I knew nothing about. Her hair was lightly curled. Her skin still had a rosy blush as if she was ready for a magazine shoot, not recovering from labor. I walked towards her without a word. Each step felt like trampling on my own self-respect. The monitor beeped steadily, the air conditioner hummed softly, and even the sound of the baby, breathing gently in her arms. The room was suffocatingly quiet, so quiet my own heartbeat pounded in my ears like a hammer. Then she opened her mouth. "Can you drive me to see Derek? I want to show him the baby he created." The words fell like boulders on my chest. The baby he created. Not we, not yours and mine, but his. Derek's. I stood frozen. Part of me wanted to scream, to ask her what the hell she was thinking. But I didn't. I couldn't. I just stared at her, then down at the small tray beside the bed. On it lay the unsigned birth certificate. I picked up the paper, gently but firmly. She watched me, confused. I ripped it in half, then quarters, then eighths. The pieces fluttered down like ashes, like the thing called family I thought I was building. She blinked, her smile faltering for a flicker of disbelief. But that was nothing compared to what I did next. I opened the drawer beside her, pulled out the hospital admission file. The 3-page bill I had already paid. I took out the check stub, flipped it over, and slowly tucked it into my jacket pocket. Then I tore the hospital file into pieces, just like the birth certificate. Shreds scattered across the floor, as if I were scattering the pieces of my own heart. The only sound then was the creak of a chair as her father shot up. "Are you crazy?" he yelled, his voice sharp and high-pitched. I didn't look at him. I only looked at her. "Not my child. Not my problem." I spoke softly, but each word cut like a knife. She looked at me, her lips starting to tremble. The earlier smile was gone, replaced by wide eyes and an unspoken fear. Her father stepped forward, trying to grab my arm. I pulled back, effortlessly. The man meant nothing to me now. I leaned towards Melissa, whispering right beside her ear, quiet enough for no one else to hear clearly, but sharp enough to pierce straight through. "You slept with a gym trainer, and now you want me to raise his kid." She went pale. Her cheeks flushed, then drained of color, turning a strange shade of gray. Then tears welled up, like a biological reaction, not genuine remorse. She cried, but I felt nothing. No pity, no anger, just clarity. As if I was seeing everything without the fog for the first time. The nurse in the corner frantically hit the call button for security. She clutched the baby, sobbing like she was playing a role she hadn't learned the lines for. But I didn't stay to watch the rest of the scene. I turned and walked out. The automatic door hissed shut behind me with a soft thud, like the closing of an entire chapter of my life. No one called me back. No one ran after me. I walked away, each step taking me into a completely different world. Outside in the hallway, the fluorescent lights still flickered. A young nurse smiled at me, probably thinking I was a new dad. I gave a slight nod and walked straight out. The cold wind hit my face. I took a deep breath for the first time since standing in that room for nearly an hour. But that breath didn't bring relief. It just reminded me I was still alive. And that was just the beginning. Looking back, I see all the signs were there. clear as a red light on a deserted street at night. But at the time, I kept deliberately ignoring them, as if not looking directly at it would make it disappear. Maybe because I was still in love. Maybe because I was afraid that admitting it meant I would never be myself again. It started about 8 months ago. Melissa began coming home late. A few minutes at first, then hours. She said meetings ran late. Then friends dragged her out to eat. Then a friend was having a mental breakdown and needed comforting. The way she said it, the way she looked at me, her tired but gentle voice, it made me believe her. Or at least, made me want to believe. I thought, she's tired. It must just be work. And I wasn't much better. I worked overtime almost every night, trying to save money for the house project in the suburbs she once called her dream. But then she started changing. Not dramatic changes, but subtle ones. Like buying a new perfume, a citrus vanilla scent I'd once said I hated, but she wore every time she left the house. She changed her hairstyle, learned new makeup techniques, wore dresses I'd never seen. Once, I joked she looked like she was getting ready for a date. She laughed, softly, as if I'd said something silly. But when she turned away, the smile didn't reach her eyes. One time I came home early from work, a rare event because the construction site was delayed by rain. I walked into the kitchen, and she jumped so hard she dropped the glass she was holding. Her hands trembled. Her eyes looked at me as if I'd caught her doing something. Her phone was face down, screen dark. I asked gently, "You okay?" She nodded, forced a smile, said she was watching a sad video. But nobody watching a sad video wipes their tears on their shirt instead of a tissue. Later on, she guarded her phone like it was her second life. Never left the screen facing up. Notifications, all turned off. Every time I got close, she'd flip it over or pick it up, even just to take a drink of water. One night, I woke up midway and saw the faint glow from her side of the bed. She was texting someone. When I shifted, she quickly shoved the phone under her pillow and turned to hug me as if nothing happened. I didn't ask anything. I just lay there, eyes wide open in the dark, her back pressed against my chest, but I'd never felt so far away from her. Then it happened. One rainy afternoon, just after leaving the construction site, I got a text from her. "Honey, gonna be late tonight. Sudden meeting with the project department." I read it and didn't think much of it, until I stopped at the gas station near our house and happened to see her car parked in front of a small Italian restaurant. Inside, through the rain-streaked glass door, I saw her laughing, candlelight reflecting on her cheek. Across from her sat a man. Not someone familiar. Not someone who belonged in my life. I stood there, still holding the gas pump, hearing the steady hum in my ears. The light rain tapped softly on the car roof. I didn't go in. I didn't make a scene. I just watched, then drove away. On the way home, the radio played an old sad song, the melody feeling like it was screaming in my chest. I told myself, maybe it's a colleague. Maybe she needed someone to share the pressure with. But actually, I knew. I just wasn't brave enough to say it out loud. From that night on, I started living with a strange silence. She still hugged me when we slept, still kissed me good morning, but there was something different in her eyes. As if I were just an anchor, temporarily holding her steady in a storm she was waiting to leave. And I, fool that I was, still hoped that if I loved enough, if I was patient just a little longer, everything would go back to how it was. But no, nothing went back. Only the truth became clearer. And my heart grew emptier. That night, I came home earlier than expected. The shift was canceled because a materials truck overturned on the highway. I didn't tell Melissa beforehand, partly because I wanted to surprise her, partly because I wanted to see what happened when she thought she wasn't being watched. It was dusk. The sky was gray, clouds heavy like rain could fall at any moment. I got out of the car, my dirt-caked work boots leaving tracks on the front walkway. Everything was strangely quiet. No music, no TV, just a silence that felt suspicious. I opened the door gently, making no sound. Inside, only a few soft yellow lights were on. The dim lighting seemed like someone had deliberately created a cozy atmosphere, but it wasn't meant for me. I heard the first laugh from the room at the end of the hall. It was Melissa's, not the kind of laugh she gave me, that soft chuckle after a mundane story. No, this was a tender laugh, breathy and sweet, the kind I used to hear when we were dating. Before life became strained and quiet, I walked slowly closer. The door was slightly ajar. It was the room we planned for the baby. The room was unfinished, one wall half-painted. On the rocking chair, Melissa sat turned sideways, hand on her belly, phone pressed to her ear, her hair falling over her shoulder. Her voice softened, so low I had to hold my breath to hear. I think, maybe the baby will have your dimple. I froze. Dimple? I glanced at the small mirror hanging on the wall. It reflected part of my face, the hallway light just enough to see the lines. My face had never had a dimple. Never. Not on the left cheek. Not on the right. Never. There was nothing hereditary for me in that sentence. Melissa was quiet for a moment, then giggled again. No, I don't think Jason suspects anything. He's too busy to notice. I couldn't hear the rest. Every sound after that turned into a dull echo in my head. My heart pounded so hard my ears were ringing. I stood there, fingers still clenched around the car keys so tightly they drew blood from my palm. In that moment, I didn't scream, didn't charge in, didn't break anything. I just turned and walked back outside. It started to rain. The first drops landed on my jacket shoulder, seeped down my neck, cold. I got back in the car, sat in the driver's seat, and closed the door. The soundproofing made the outside world distant. I sat there, hands on the steering wheel, staring blankly at the dashboard as if it could give me an answer. I didn't start the engine. I just sat. 30 minutes passed. Then an hour. Then more. The rain poured harder. The windshield fogged up from my breath. I wiped it with the back of my hand, only to see my own reflection in the glass. My face, thinner, eyes sunken, and no dimple. I thought about all the times I worked an extra shift so Melissa could relax. All the times I cooked, folded laundry, fixed the outlet in the kitchen because she was afraid of electricity. All the times I thought, just try a little harder, this family will be okay. And while I was trying to hold on to that family, she was in the room I hadn't finished painting, dreaming about another man's dimple. I don't remember when I drove away. I only know that when I got back home, it was almost midnight. Melissa was on the sofa, still in her old clothes, holding a mug of tea as if nothing had happened. "You're home early?" she asked, a habitual smile appearing. I nodded, hung my jacket on the hook. I didn't look at her much, didn't mention anything about that evening. I just said, "I'm tired." Going up to bed, I remember vividly the moment she put her hand on her belly and whispered about the dimple. It wasn't just a sentence. It was a blade that didn't draw blood. It drew the truth. And for the first time in my life, I knew what it felt like to hurt so much you no longer felt pain. From that night on, I was no longer the blind man believing love was enough. I started noticing everything. Glances, words, every prolonged silence. I didn't say it out loud, but I knew, and I was waiting for the right time. I returned home the next morning. Pale sunlight streamed through the curtains, casting a thin layer of gold on the wooden floor as if trying to soothe a long, sleepless night. But no light was warm enough to chase away the coldness inside me then. Melissa was in the hospital. She would be there for at least 2 more days. I had the time I needed, not to rest, but to uncover everything I had tried to avoid. I went straight upstairs to the bedroom. The familiar room, everything still in its place, tidy as Melissa always liked it. But that very perfection made it hard to breathe, as if she hid everything so skillfully that even I couldn't find it, despite living under the same roof. I knelt before the wooden dresser beside the bed. The bottom left drawer, the one Melissa always kept locked. She once said it just held a few old high school diaries, some old photos. I used to believe that. Used to. I went down to the garage, found the old crowbar I'd used to pry up tiles. My hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from knowing that whatever waited behind that lock wouldn't be easy to swallow. When I jammed the metal bar into the drawer slit and pried hard, a dry cracking sound echoed. A small sound, but to me, it sounded like opening the gates of hell. Inside was a dark blue leather-bound notebook, a silver USB drive, and a small envelope tied with red thread. I picked up the notebook first, flipped through the first few pages, swirling blue-purple ink, soft handwriting. The first line I read was, "Third time at the studio, stronger than last time. Don't know how to hide my smile when I get home." Next page, beach trip with him. Jason thinks I'm visiting mom. Each line felt like a cut to my chest. Melissa wasn't just cheating. She was living in it, immersed, enjoying it, and worst of all, planning it. Some pages had dates, hearts, symbols, even exclamation points. I read on, he wants a baby. Haven't dared to say anything yet. But if that's what makes him stay, that sentence froze me. Not from shock, but from the feeling of being deceived for so long. I put the notebook down, gasping for breath. The bedroom suddenly felt smaller, the walls closing in. I plugged the USB into my laptop, not expecting much. but the screen filled with dozens of video files. One folder was simply named Leg Day. I opened the first file. Melissa, in the gray workout set I gave her last Christmas, laughing and joking in the gym. Behind her was the trainer, Derek. He placed his hand on her waist, adjusting her form. They didn't know the camera was recording. I did. I watched her lean in, laugh, touch his shoulder, then kiss him. I stopped it right before things went further. My heart couldn't take it anymore. I closed the laptop, sat silently, so silent I could hear the clock ticking second by second on the desk. The room felt cold, even though the heat was on. I felt like a shadow, a man who had trusted, loved, and been turned into a joke in his own home. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but my steps were steady. I gathered the notebook, the USB, and the unopened envelope. I didn't need to read it anymore. I had seen enough. I went downstairs to the kitchen, put everything in a paper bag. Then, I made a cup of coffee. For the first time in weeks, I drank it without tasting the bitterness. Maybe because everything else was already too bitter. I sat there, looking out at the backyard, where I had installed the swing for Melissa, where she used to sit for hours reading, smiling whenever I looked through the window. All just memories now. And now, I knew for sure, they were never real. I picked up the phone. Didn't call friends. Didn't call my mom. I called a lawyer. Do you have time today? I asked. For what? My wife just had a baby boy. I replied, my voice calm. It's just not mine. There was silence on the other end for a moment. Then the lawyer said, you should come to the office. Bring anything you think is evidence. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. I looked around one more time. This house, this life, everything I had tried to hold on to, now just a stage with broken props. And I, the man who had played the husband, patient, devoted, foolish, had taken my final bow. Now, it was time for me to rewrite the script with the truth. And this time, I would be the one holding the pen. I arrived at the lawyer's office at 11 a.m., holding the paper bag with the notebook, the USB drive, and a copy of the birth certificate I had torn and taped back together. A dried coffee stain remained on my jacket lapel because I hadn't had the mind to change. I probably looked like someone who had just crawled out of wreckage, which, essentially, I had. The office was on the second floor of an old red brick building, a tarnished brass plaque outside reading, Thomas C. Adler, Family and Estate Law. In the elevator, I glanced at myself in the mirror, tried to smile, but the reflection showed a pale, rigid face. Nothing like the me from 6 months ago. No more goofy grin when Melissa texted, got strawberry ice cream for you, on a weekend. No more the man who believed effort was enough. Stepping into the office, the smell of old paper and weak coffee mixed with the steady hum of a printer. The secretary smiled and asked me to wait. I didn't wait long. Attorney Adler, a man around 50 with salt and pepper hair and a voice as deep as an undertow, came out, shook my hand, and led me into his office. I sat down, opened the paper bag, placed each item on the desk. Without lengthy introductions, I just said, my wife just had a baby boy, but he's not mine. Adler didn't raise an eyebrow, didn't show shock. He nodded, as if he'd heard this story hundreds of times. You want to protect your assets, right? He asked. I nodded. I want out of this marriage without being tied to a child I didn't create, without being dragged into her life anymore. I want a clean break. He took the notebook, flipped through a few pages, then the USB, plugged it into his computer. I watched him watch the clip I had seen, silently, without blinking. When the screen went dark, he turned back to me. You have enough to prove infidelity, deceit, and intentional misrepresentation in the marriage, he stated clearly, his voice calm but firm. And with the child not being biologically related, you can petition for a complete disclaimer of paternity and support obligations. But, he paused, tapping his finger lightly on the wooden desk. If she manages to file the birth certificate with your name on it, you need to act immediately. No delays. I nodded, silent. My throat was dry. I never thought I'd need words like disclaimer of paternity or termination of parental rights. But now, they were the only things keeping me from being dragged into inescapable mud. Adler handed me a folder containing a draft divorce petition, a form requesting paternity verification, and a legal power of attorney granting him full representation. Each piece of paper felt like a slice, but instead of hurting more, it brought clarity. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was controlling something. Has she ever tried to transfer joint assets into someone else's name? He asked, as if reading my mind. I hesitated for a moment, then remembered. Once, I saw a pre-printed email Melissa asked me to sign, saying it was a confirmation for a loan to help her mother fix her house. I was in a hurry then, didn't read it carefully, just signed. I recounted this. Adler frowned. Do you have a copy? I nodded. I think so. In my inbox. I'll send it. Do it today, he said. If there are signs of non-transparent transfers, we can request an asset freeze before she can act further. I leaned back in the chair, looking at the ceiling. Small cracks followed the lines of the fluorescent lights. Outside the window, yellow leaves began to fall, the wind whispering through the old window seals. Time moved slower than usual. I used to think if you were just kind, you'd be met with kindness in return, I said, unsure if I was talking to the lawyer or myself. Adler didn't rush his reply. He just said, after a few seconds of silence, kindness isn't a guarantee. But in this situation, it's the starting point for protecting yourself without losing your humanity. I didn't know how to respond. Just felt my eyes sting, but I didn't cry. I was past that point. We finalized the plan. He would file the papers Monday morning. If Melissa contested, we had enough evidence for confrontation. If she remained silent, even better. I just needed a clean path forward. Before I left the office, Adler shook my hand again. The kind of handshake from men who have seen too much brokenness but still stand firm. I've seen men destroyed trying to be the decent one when the person beside them wasn't even trying. Don't be one of them. I left the office, the sun brighter now. Lights shone on the street, as if the city was trying to offer comfort. The cool autumn wind brushed against my collar. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was drifting. I had a plan. I had paperwork. I had the truth. And this time, I wouldn't wait anymore. I met Emily for the first time at a quiet coffee shop near downtown. She sat at a table by the window, wearing a gray sweater and a dark scarf, her posture straight but her eyes weary. She looked no different from me. Someone who had just escaped a tornado but wasn't sure if they were standing on solid ground or still adrift at sea. I walked over, pulled out a chair, and sat opposite her without needing to say anything. We just looked at each other for a few seconds. The eyes of two people who have been betrayed need no introduction. Emily was Derek's wife. She found me through the note I left in an envelope, along with the evidence she needed. And for the first time in my life, I talked to a stranger who felt so much like me. We sat there, 2 cups of coffee slowly cooling. She told me about Derek constantly claiming late shifts, about the first time she saw a text from Mel with a heart emoji. I told her about the dimple and the silver USB drive. No tears. No yelling, just stories like fragments from a shattered picture. Then she said something that made me stop. We should make them face each other. Not in the dark, not through texts or court filings, but face to face. In public. Nowhere left to hide. I looked up at her. What do you mean? Dinner. A supposed reconciliation meeting. Melissa thinks you're softening. Derek thinks I've forgiven him. They'll both come, hand in hand, ready to lie one more time. And then, we'll be there. In person. No screaming. No fighting, just putting the truth down on the dinner table. I sat quietly for a moment, then nodded. A week later, we booked a private room at the old Italian restaurant Melissa used to love. It had dim lighting, square wooden tables, crisp white tablecloths, and waiting wine glasses. Emily and I arrived early. She brought a thick envelope containing copies of all the evidence, photos, emails, hotel bills, printed text messages from iCloud. I brought a copy of the divorce papers and a copy of the document confirming I was not the legal father. We sat side by side, facing the door. Neither of us spoke. Only the clinking of cutlery from the main dining area drifted in, along with soft jazz playing over the ceiling speakers. Around 7:40 p.m., the door opened. Melissa and Derek walked in. Hand in hand, I saw the exact moment they saw us. First shock, then paralysis. Derek dropped Melissa's hand like he'd touched hot iron. Melissa took half a step back, her eyes filling with panic. Jason, she spoke first, her voice quieter than a breath. Emily didn't respond. She just took the envelope from the table, placed it gently in front of them. I think you two should look at this before ordering. They stood frozen. Derek looked at me, forcing a smile. What is this? I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. It's the Last Supper. For two people who enjoy cheating. Melissa opened the envelope. Her eyes scanned quickly over each page. Her face went paper white. She turned to Derek. You said she moved out, she said, her lips trembling. You said you broke up with Jason last month. Derek shot back, his voice rising. Emily stood up, hands planted on the table. Stop acting, both of you. Everything's there. A whole year of lies, and you thought you'd never get caught. I opened the divorce file, pushed it towards Melissa. You have 3 options. 1. Sign it and get out of my life. 2. Let the court handle it. 3. Keep lying and get dragged through the media. I don't care anymore. I just want the truth put in its proper place. Derek stepped back, touching Emily's shoulder. Honey, listen, don't call me honey. Emily's voice was sharp as a blade. I used to love you, but the person you love is yourself. No one was sitting anymore. Melissa bowed her head, tears starting to fall, but no one offered a tissue. She walked around the table, trying to touch my arm. I moved back. Don't. I used to be the only one protecting you, and you made me the last one to know the truth. She looked at me, choked up. Jason, I just wanted to be loved. I was afraid of losing you. You didn't lose me, I said. You left me, bit by bit. Every time you turned your back on what I gave. Emily placed a hand on my shoulder, so lightly it barely touched. Let's go, she said. I nodded. As we walked out of the room, I didn't look back. Didn't see Melissa on her knees. Didn't see Derek holding his head as if the world had collapsed. I only heard the heavy wooden door closing behind us. A deep, solid sound, like the perfect end to a fake play. Outside, a light rain had just started. Emily and I stood under the awning, breathing in the cold air. Do you regret it? I asked, looking out at the dimly lit street. She shook her head. I only wish I'd done this sooner. I looked at her, then let out a soft laugh. Not a happy one. Just a small, tired, but real sound. I don't feel pain anymore, I said. Just light. Because we put the burden down, Emily replied. And in the end, it wasn't ours to carry. We walked away, each in our own direction. But I knew, from that moment on, I was no longer walking like a betrayed man. I was walking like a man who had just gotten himself back. I returned to the house the next afternoon, sunlight falling silently through the leaves outside. No Melissa, no familiar footsteps on the wood floor or the lingering scent of vanilla perfume. Only a light breeze slipping through the slightly open window, rustling the curtains and leaving a soft sound, like the sigh of a house that had witnessed too many lies. I didn't turn on the lights. I walked through the hallway in the dim twilight, my shoes creaking on the floorboards. Everything was intact, just as she left it. A coffee mug with lipstick stains on the table, a thin cardigan draped casually over the sofa, and in the bedroom, the sheets still held her scent. I didn't touch anything at first. I just walked around like a ghost returning from battle, unsure whether to clean up or abandon it all. I stood before the framed wedding photo on the wall, where I wore a charcoal gray suit, and she beamed in a floor-length white dress. The man in the photo was entirely different. Bright eyes, a natural smile, hand resting lightly on her back as if the whole world was held in that embrace. I took the photo down. Didn't throw it. Didn't smash it. Just gently placed it on the table, then opened a drawer to find a lighter. I went out to the backyard, the spot where she used to love reading each morning. The grass had grown ankle-high. I took the metal barbecue tray, placed the wedding photo on it, then added a few anniversary cards, some old handwritten notes I once thought were sincere. I lit it. The flame caught faster than I expected. The smell of burning paper mingled with dry wood and ash, rising in the cool, early autumn breeze. I sat down on the old wooden bench, watching the firelight reflect in my eyes as if looking into the past one last time. Memories flickered through my mind like scenes from an old, faded film. The first time she said, I love you. The time I proposed under falling snow. The time we argued just because we couldn't agree on the living room paint color. Ending with a night spent holding each other on the sofa, her head resting on my chest, peaceful as if nothing could break us. But in the end, everything broke. And the very person I believed was my safest harbor was the one who pushed me to the edge. The fire died down. I stirred the ashes with a metal rod, burning a few remaining photos. I felt lighter with each plume of smoke that rose. Not exactly peaceful, but something like acceptance. When I went back inside, my phone vibrated. A text from an old acquaintance. Jason, what happened? Melissa said you left her while she was pregnant. She said you were unreasonably suspicious and acting like a crazy person. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed back. She's a good actress, but I'm no longer cast in her play. I received 3 more messages within 10 minutes. A mutual friend, a relative of Melissa's, an old colleague of hers, all saying similar things. Jason, how could you do that to a woman who just gave birth? She cried so much, it sounds heartbreaking. You should have handled it more decently. I didn't reply. I didn't get angry either. I just exhaled deeply, placed the phone face down on the table. I understood. She hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. She was rewriting the narrative for outsiders, painting me as the heartless, cold husband who abandoned her at her most vulnerable. I went upstairs, opened the closet. I took out every item she had left behind. The neatly hung dresses, the pink wool scarf I bought her last winter, a pair of high heels still with the price tag on. I packed everything into large plastic bags, without weight, without regret. The room felt larger with each zipper I closed. In a small drawer, I found a little notebook she used for pregnancy notes. Inside were slanted lines. Felt the baby move for the first time today. Hope he has his eyes. I didn't know if he meant me or Derek, and maybe she wasn't sure either. I folded the notebook, put it in the last bag. Before going to bed, I went out to the backyard one more time. The fire was completely out, just a few red embers hidden beneath the ash. I sat down, listening to the crickets chirping in the night. Above, the sky was dark, dotted with stars. I didn't pray. I didn't wish for anything. I just sat there, in the silence, with the remnants of an old life that had just been burned away. Tomorrow, I would clean this house out. But tonight, I allowed myself regret. Not regret for her, but regret for the version of me who once believed that love, if strong enough, could save anything. I was cleaning out the garage when I heard a knock on the door. 3 knocks. Not rushed. Not hesitant. As if the person outside knew exactly why they were there. I didn't need to look through the peephole to know who it was. There's a specific kind of silence that accompanies Melissa. The heavy silence of someone who used to know they were the center and now isn't sure what they are. I wiped my hands on an old rag, walked down the hall. The afternoon light streamed through the frosted glass door, casting her silhouette onto the tiled floor. She stood there, holding the baby. A thin blue blanket was wrapped around him, his eyes not yet fully open. Melissa's face was pale, hair tied back neatly, dark circles under her eyes. No makeup, no perfume, just raw Melissa, stripped of her layers. I opened the door. She looked at me, then burst into tears, the crying not loud but continuous, as if it had built up for weeks just to break in this moment. "Jason, please, just 5 minutes," she said, her voice choked. I didn't answer right away. I looked at her as if seeing her truly for the first time. Not the beautiful wife from the wedding photos, not the woman who knew how to say exactly what I wanted to hear, but a human being, flawed, panicked, and about to lose everything. I stepped outside, gently closing the door behind me. Didn't invite her in. I stood on the porch, hands in my pockets, the afternoon sun hitting the side of my face. It was colder than I thought. "I gave you 6 years," I said slowly, "and you used every minute of it to lie." Melissa shook her head repeatedly, tears streaming down. I was confused. I was pregnant. I lost my way. Derek left me. He said it was all too much. I let out a soft laugh, not humorous, just familiar. Everything she said was the same old spin cycle she'd used too many times before. "The man who made a baby with you doesn't want to raise it now?" I asked, without raising my voice, without sarcasm. Just a question. Real. She bowed her head. One hand clutched the baby tighter, the other reached out to grab my sleeve. "Jason, I have no one left. You're my last family." I looked at her hand gripping my sleeve. The hand that once held mine in our first movie theater date, trembled when I put the wedding ring on her finger, held me whenever she said, "I'm sorry." And now, it didn't carry the weight of the past it held. I gently pulled my arm away. "You don't understand," I said. "Family isn't the place you return to when nowhere else will take you." Melissa opened her mouth to say something, but didn't get the chance. I took a step back, putting my hand on the doorknob. The baby stirred slightly. I looked at him for a long moment. No hatred, no contempt, just a pang of regret for a life starting under these circumstances. "I know I was wrong," Melissa stammered. "But if not for me, can you do it for the baby? I know you'd be a better father than anyone." I was silent for a moment, then answered, my eyes locked on hers. "Precisely because I would be a good father. I won't raise someone else's child just to compensate for your mistakes." She choked, trying to say something, but only managing a few hoarse sounds. I looked at her one last time, no longer seeing the woman who once moved me. No longer seeing the person I wanted to build a future with. Only someone standing at my door because she had nowhere else to go. "You're not looking for me," I said, lowering my voice. "You're looking for an escape route." I opened the door, stepped inside. Before closing it, I looked at her and said the last thing I needed to say. You didn't lose me today. You lost me a long time ago. You just didn't realize it. The door clicked shut with a dry finality. Behind the wood was the sound of the wind, the rustle of dry leaves at her feet, and the faint whimper of a baby. I leaned my forehead against the door, closed my eyes. No tears, no anger, just a silence so deep I could hear my own breathing. I stood there for a few more minutes, until her footsteps faded away. No more pleading, no one knocking, no one crying on the porch, just me. And for the first time in a long time, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going back, and I wasn't waiting for anyone anymore. Freedom doesn't arrive in a single day. It's not something that happens after a nod or a slammed door. Freedom comes slowly, like a soaking rain after a drought. First a few quiet drops landing on your palm, then suddenly you're drenched without realizing when it happened. I moved out of the old house on a clear Saturday morning. Not much stuff, just one pickup truck load with a few boxes, a worn armchair, and a laptop that had survived the exhausting days with me. I didn't keep any photos. No cards, no anniversary bracelets, no lingering scent on a pillow. Everything was left behind, like fragments of an old version of myself I no longer wanted to carry. The new apartment was on the third floor of a small building near the woods to the north. Every morning, when I opened the balcony door, I could see the sun creeping over the pine tops. The sound of birds, the soft whistle of wind through the trees, and the absolute absence of lies. It all made me feel like I'd woken up from a long dream. A dream where I was always asleep in my own story. I started over with the smallest things. Bought a wooden table to assemble myself. Got a library card. Took long hikes on weekends. And then, I went back to the gym. Not the one where Derek had touched my wife's back, but a completely new place. Smaller. No giant mirrors, no pounding music. Just the smell of rubber, the clang of weights, and people who didn't care about anyone's personal life. I like that. The first time I walked in, I saw myself in the mirror. Hair a bit longer, eyes still deep, but my face less rigid. I lifted a barbell, heard the clang of iron, and felt like I was piecing back together the parts of myself I had lost. No one asked who I used to be. No one knew what I had been through. And because of that, I could be anyone, or simply just be me. Occasionally, Emily and I still text. Nothing romantic. No wistful what-ifs. We're like two survivors of the same storm, each standing on a different shore, waving hello amidst the old wreckage. Neither tries to rebuild anything from the old bricks, because we both understand. The only thing worth keeping is the lesson. I started keeping a journal. Awkward lines at first, gradually finding a flow. Some days I wrote about small things like making dinner without burning it. Some days I wrote about nightmares, where I still saw Melissa at the door, holding the baby, saying, I have no one left. But the difference was, now I didn't jolt awake anymore. I just lay there, exhaled deeply, and told myself, you survived. One Sunday morning, I drove up to Vermont. Just me, a backpack, and the open road. I rented a small cabin deep in the woods. No Wi-Fi, no cell service. Just the sound of a stream babbling behind the house and the wind whispering through the metal roof at night like the murmuring of the mountains. The next morning, I climbed to a high rocky outcrop overlooking the valley below. It had rained the night before. The air was cold and damp, but so fresh I wanted to breathe it all in and scream. And I did. I screamed. I screamed out all the unanswered questions. Screamed out the sleepless nights, the times I silently endured, the betrayed dreams. I screamed until my throat burned, until the weight in my chest lifted. And then, I sat down, letting the wind dry my face. Freedom was that feeling. Not when the betrayer is punished. Not when the court makes a ruling. But when you stand in nature, no one watching, no one listening, and you don't have to pretend anymore. After the trip, I returned to the city, but not to the old me. I worked harder, but not to escape. I listened more closely, not to respond, but to understand. I started believing in small things, a stranger's smile in the elevator, a song playing by chance in a quiet cafe, or the way sunlight through a glass made the water look like gold. Late one night, I received a text from an unsaved number. He asks where his daddy is. I don't know how to answer. I looked at the words, then deleted it. No reply, no anger, just no longer my story. And that was the most beautiful thing I ever had. The right to choose silence instead of justification. The right to turn away without feeling heavy. The right to move on without looking back. If someone asked me now, Do you forgive? I would say, I don't know. But I let it go. And maybe, for someone who lived in another's shadow, that's enough. I stood on the balcony, watching the city slowly fall asleep below. On the table was a glass of wine. Beside it, a half-read book. The wind brushed past my shoulder, gentle. Far away, a car horn sounded long then faded. Everything was quiet. I leaned back against the wall, closed my eyes. And for the first time after everything, peace didn't feel like a distant concept anymore. It was here, inside me, right now. A year after I closed the door on Melissa, I stood on top of a small hill in Vermont, the cold wind cutting through my jacket, the sky vast and cloudless. Below me lay the valley, blanketed in golden leaves, and up here, nothing reminded me of her. No phantom texts, no memories slipping into sleep. Just me, the silence, and a deep, steady breath. I used to think revenge would bring satisfaction. But in the end, what brought relief was letting go. Not forgetting. I couldn't forget everything that happened. But I learned to stop letting it control me. To stop my hands from shaking when I heard her name. To stop asking myself, where did it go wrong? Now, I can sit alone in silence, read a book, make a morning coffee, or simply watch the wind move through the pines outside my balcony. I don't need anyone asking, "Are you okay?" to know that I am. I walked through a storm, lost everything I thought I held dear, only to realize what I needed most was myself. If anyone listening is in the middle of their own storm, know that the rain doesn't last forever. And sometimes freedom doesn't come from running away, but from daring to stand still, look straight ahead, and say, I deserve more than this.